Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Sessions.
Welcome back.
Today, we are talking about, or continuing our series on the psychology of coaching. And this is segment number 3. And
Behaviorism.
We're talking about motivation and behaviorism.
And yeah, all those related topics, which are habits, addictions, behavior modification.
Fun stuff.
All that good stuff.
And so one of the things the reason we're doing this series is because a lot of people think psychology is just about therapy. But psychology actually affects so much of our life. Businesses use psychology, organizational psychology for teams, and advertising. We use psychology is used on social media, as you may have seen that social media show they have on Netflix. What was it called? The show Social Experiment or something?
Something like that, yeah.
And so they're talking about how they're really designed to create habits for people and get you addicted to different things, and we're very addictive people. So
that's the dark side of
the dark side of it. So we're going to talk about all those things today of what causes us to be in these kind of bad habits or habits that we feel stuck in. How do we liberate ourselves? How do we motivate ourselves to change? And we're going to talk about Pavlov's dog and Skinner and all the fun ideas that came through the study of behaviorism.
There's also some great positive things in education, of course, when parents and teachers talk about time out.
Oh, yeah.
They're talking behaviorism, basically.
So education is...
Yes, how we learn, how athletes are rewarded. Very powerful mechanisms or principles of behaviorism.
Getting people, getting kids to, parenting to,
Absolutely.
Getting your child to.
Without having to spank them and those kind of things. Yeah.
So let's talk about what is behaviorism. How would you describe it?
Yeah, so a little bit of the history. It goes back to Pavlov. And Pavlov noticed, he's a Russian physiologist. He wasn't a psychologist, but he was looking at working with dogs, and he noticed that the dog started salivating whenever he walked into the room, basically. So he started to set up experiments to see what is the dog cueing into that makes him salivate so much before even the food is presented. So he found that principle of what's called classical conditioning now, where our mind tends to pair things up. So if something happens when something else is present, guess what? Your mind is going to associate those things, and it's going to automatically be in there. That you associate, or for example, the dog was associating the ringing of a bell with the receiving of food. So when the bell rings, then he already starts to salivate, meaning he's prepared for the food. And that is going on not only in dogs, but in every organism, the pairing of stimuli.
And I find it interesting with behaviorism is that in a way, the way our brain works is it's always trying to warn us ahead of things. I think that's what that classical conditioning is, to protect us and keep us. So, when I was in hypnotherapy school, they told me this story about the cavemen. 2 cavemen go into on the hunt, and one of them, there's a rustle in the bush, and a tiger jumps out and kills his buddy, and in front of him, and he freaks out. He has that fright or freeze. He freezes, and then he gets scared, and then he runs away. And so then the next time he goes out to hunt, he's fine. Everything's good. He's thinking about his buddy, and he's like, hope that tiger doesn't come out again. But then he hears a rustle in the bush, and immediately that fight or flight response happens. And so his body and mind is responding to that stimuli and associating it with a danger. And then when he realized the bird flew out, then he was relaxed again. So think about everything in our life that we're triggered around is that we're making assumptions based on something that was early conditioned in us to respond to things.
Absolutely.
So positive and negative. So there's certain things that make us feel good and we don't know why. And there's certain things that make us scared and we don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, there are some ideas to why. If you think about survival from the evolutionary perspective, it's a perfect mechanism for animals to go through their life without having to think through things. Because if you move towards what feels good, what gives you comfort, what gives you nourishment, and move away from what gives you pain or discomfort, you tend to survive. You tend to stay out of trouble and to find the good things for yourself, to take care of yourself.
So this mechanism helps us find those pleasant and unpleasant to keep without our conscious experience, like a choice or our will. Basically, it's like our body is responding. And I found it interesting that the caveman didn't need to see the tiger. It was like what was stored was the moment before the tiger. So just like with Pavlov's dog, it's the bell that wasn't the food, but the bell preceded the food. So it's like the mind stores it because we know every time that happens, this is the next thing that's going to happen. So it's like predicting versus at the same time. And what I would think that the mechanism for that is for survival. So if we waited for us to get scared when the tiger, it might be too late, but the warning signs. So a lot of us have these like anxieties and stress, and it's from the stimulus that is happening from before.
Right. So as far as the definition, we really need to talk about Skinner then to get to how we think about it now in psychology, because the classical conditioning model was very basic and more interested in physiology. Whereas once Skinner came along, he took it to a whole other level. And ironically, it's very philosophical actually, because if you think about conditioning, you start to question this idea of free will. If we're conditioned by our experiences, by the environment, in other words, where does free will come in? Are we really free if we're acting out of those experiences that have shaped our behavior?
So let's talk about Skinner.
So Skinner comes along
and he wasn't very popular, like some of the things he did because he did worked on a lot of animals.
Yeah. I mean, he was definitely controversial because he was very insistent on making psychology an observable science, a measurable behavioral science. So what that means is he started saying or suggesting that we not look at what we call the mind.
You don't worry
because
about
you can't see it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
You can't measure it. So he said, why should psychology be like the European psychology at that time was basically Freud and his followers that followed him. Very introverted, very subjective. You know, your personal experiences are what's important. Skinner wanted to wrench psychology from that and say, no, let's make it a real science that can be measurable, that can be objective.
And observed the five senses.
Yes.
And everyone can see it. Yeah.
And so for a long time, I mean, in the 40s, 50s, even into the 60s, he was a big shot. He was not just on the fringes. He dominated American psychology, especially for a long time.
And he came up with operant conditioning.
Yeah, so he comes up with his, a different idea than the classical conditioning model.
Which is you're not doing anything, you're just reacting. And operant conditioning is where you have to take an action.
Yeah, so he says if you look at the way we interact with the environment, we are emitting an action, we're taking an action, and then the results that we get from the environment, meaning a positive or a negative, a reward or a punishment, that has a conditioning effect on us. And so it's our behavior that's playing into that conditioning. Not
so
just
our mind records the response from our action.
That's
where
right.
classic is just you're just in the space and this like random things happen and someone with a loud noise. If your parent was loud, you didn't do anything, but you get that kind of jumpiness around loud people. This is if I take an action, if I speak up for myself, and then there's a loud noise. Ooh, I don't like that. So it's you're participating in the conditioning in a more active way.
Very much so. It is a kind of the organism is working in conjunction with the environment, and you can't really understand the organism's behavior if you don't understand the environment, right? Because essentially the way the organism reacts and acts is based on what the environment is feeding back to the organism.
So this is how we train our dogs and cat. Like we can't really train a cat usually, but it's training and conditioning our children to behave. For us we learn the limits of where our comfort zone is, basically, of what causes other people to be mad or upset, what gives us a positive, that idea of positive reinforcement, that if we do something good, our parent would give us, you get a little reward. And then the child will end up repeating it for the reward. And if they're punished, then the child would say, I better not do that again. I better not write on the walls, Mom got really mad at that place. So we're learning that punishment reward. And continuously. And so, I think a lot of coaching in the coaching industry, there's a lot of that punishment reward. I look at, and we'll get into the limitations of this, but let's go deeper into that. It's really, when we're talking about that, it's an extrinsic motivation that we're tied to.
Yeah, when you talk about behaviorism now, and it's still used widely, you have to think about what contingencies, in other words, what feedback are you getting from your actions? Is it a reward, a punishment, a mix, etc.? And then they look at schedules of reinforcement, like what's more effective if I reward myself every time I do something, or if I reward myself only and set certain goals at certain intervals. All those kind of strategies, very powerful. We still know that it's, let's say, conditioning. The power of conditioning is one of the best documented phenomena in psychology still.
And so think about just social media. You put a post up and no one responds. And you're like, you want to take it down. You put a post up and you get a lot of likes. It's like that positive reinforcement. You're conditioned to maybe do more. People that start a business or want to ask the boss for a raise, if they keep hearing no, or someone who wants to do something more at their life, think about like actors going out and auditioning, and they keep getting no's, or writers submitting manuscripts, and after a while you're just like, why am I doing this? If you're not getting that reward. And so if we just rely on that operant conditioning, most of us will just never really step outside of our have a new life, have a change in our life, because we're only going to do what feels good.
Anybody that has tried to change a habit, a long-standing habit, they come up against this powerful force called conditioning. It's very difficult to make real lasting changes. About dieting. The research shows 3% of dieters actually get good results.
Or people that win the lottery, they lose the money, they waste all the money they get.
Absolutely. Though conditioning plays into not only habits but addiction. Drugs, of course, they're self-reinforcing in a way. That they make you feel good. They trigger pleasure centers in the body and the mind body that are very powerful. They override a lot of the logical thinking.
Well, it's interesting with addictions because it's a cycle, because you feel deprived, so you want to feel good, so you partake or imbibe in food or drink, and then after that wears off, you feel guilty, and then you feel worse about yourself, and then the only thing you can do to feel better is to go back to that thing. And so it's a cycle of punishment, reward, punishment, reward, punishment, reward. It's and think about in life, even the whole idea, we're conditioned to have a paycheck. Go and get your corporate job. Papa Bear at the company is going to take care of you. You hate your job. They say like 86% of people are actively disengaged with their work. Why do they go? They go because they're getting that paycheck at the end of the week. So it's like they'll do all these uncomfortable things, but there's a motivation there. There's something there. There's a positive reward. And I've seen so many people, especially what we do with the coach training, is we get a lot of people that are in the corporate world and want to switch and work for themselves. And they're such in the habit of getting that paycheck to let go of that and to start something new and to build it themselves. It takes a lot of courage. And the ego mind is always trying to like put you back to, don't you want to like have that comfort? And then they end up, and especially for me and a lot of the women that I've worked with over the years, they make a lot of money in the corporate world. So it's like payoff for them to start over. But I remember when I left, I that motivation for that paycheck just wore off. It was like, this isn't worth it. My life is worth something else. I want to do something meaningful. I don't care if I have to live in a tiny little apartment and sell my car and sell my beautiful condo and just, cut back, because I want to do something I love. And so that was the reward. So I found another kind of something else to motivate me besides the old thing. And that takes courage. And so when we think about changing behavior, and we don't think about the mind itself, and we just think in Skinner's terms, it really, think about how limiting that would be. It's like, I'm going to just eat differently, or I'm going to work out every day, or I'm going to work really hard to build a business. But if there's no mind and there's no meaning and no heart into what you're doing, you're just reprogramming yourself for some other goal. And so it is limiting in that way.
Yeah, and just to finish off the idea of Skinner's work, he wrote a couple of books that were really groundbreaking, because he was questioning, what is human dignity? What is freedom? These ideas that we have about society. He was thinking, maybe we could engineer society to where we can control behavior.
I think someone read that book.
I mean, you can see why he was controversial in some regards. He was talking about seriously thinking about engineering societies to make them better. I mean, his intention was to make it better, obviously. Where behaviorism ran into problems was that it couldn't address imagination. It couldn't address language. It couldn't really address the deeper sense of ourselves as human beings, because if you only focus on external behavior, it's like you say, then motivation is simply about obtaining some external goal, and you're handing all the power over to the external to tell you who you are and how you're going to be.
And a perfect example of that is, I know a lot of people who went off and started their own business as a coach or a business coach, and they leave their corporate job, and then they go and build up their business, and they are really successful, but they're working just as much as they were in the corporate job. They're not as fulfilled. And then all of a sudden they, after they make a couple $1 million, they're like, I got into coaching to help people and to do more deeper work and spiritual work. And then all of a sudden you see them pivot to do more of the spiritual work and to make that change. But then they're still like, but the business coaching is what's bringing in so much money. And how do I do that? And so I see a lot of people, they can do one thing, like change behavior to maybe not work in the corporate world, but they still haven't worked inside themselves to really find that meaning and purpose and what they're really doing. And so also that when we do change behavior and we don't include the mind, we actually have to work harder to change the shift of behavior, it just feels like we're working against this external mechanism, and we're looking for that carrot that we're chasing all the time, and we're really, it's kind of like we're caught up in it, and it's stressful and it's hard. That's why I think when we do the inner work, a lot of most coaches you talk about inner work. That's when the change happens, because we can't just behave our way to get our goal. A good example would be a dating coach. I see so many coaches out there that are dating coaches, but they're not really working on the mind or the person. They're saying, if you go out and go on 50 dates, and if you have your profile look this way and you act a certain way, and you're going to get a positive response from someone. And so the woman or the man is connected or attached to that positive response from someone. They're not even being who they really are, and they're just kind of getting that response. So they're kind of robots trying to get the prize, but then is that prize what they really want? Who am I? And is the relationship, what is going on underneath that? So it's more complex than just behaving in a way so that you're good, and then a guy will love you, if you do all the things that they tell you to do. Yeah. And so that's where I got frustrated when I was getting into the relationship coaching when I first started, was there needs to be something else besides just changing behavior.
Yeah, we know just changing the behavior, often as soon as the environment goes back to the old environment, your behavior will revert back to the old patterns, because again, you're simply depending on external circumstances to kind of guide yourself by.
I'd like to talk a little bit about negative reinforcement. We talk about positive, like getting that result, but how many? Let's talk a little bit about that. Someone who keeps getting that no, they audition, or they try to start a business, or they try to lose weight, and they're kind of getting that negative response. They can kind of get into this place where they don't have power, this powerless place.
Well, yeah, that can be reinforcing for people as well. So if you think about somebody, that the actor not getting the job, they could be invested in not succeeding, because staying in their comfort zone is reinforcing. Also, when you think about people that are anxious, avoiding situations to them is reinforcing. That meaning it rewards them because they successfully avoided anxiety-provoking situations. So it increases their anxiety. They get more entrenched in that response to life. Being anxious and avoiding situations, not taking risk, not really going for success. So even when they get a break, they'll sabotage it because they want to go back to their comfort zone. It's more reinforcing, it's more pleasant for them to remain small and to play small than to have those big opportunities.
It's really, we just watched this, it's on Netflix, the Tiger Woods series. And he was basically they were using conditioning to get him to be this excellent player. Like he practiced a lot. It wasn't his idea to play golf, it was his father's. And it was very interesting how he ended up sabotaging it, because and then you'll have to see the series to see. Well, he turns out he's better again. But I love the concept of him. He had to find himself. He had to find his own motivation within himself. Instead of just winning the game, it had to be more than that. And that's why I see this a lot in the coaching industry. There's a lot of people. I mean, I know you probably all see it. Those are your coaches. Is everyone's talking about how much money they're making, but not how much lives they're changing. And they're getting caught up, just like they did with the corporate world, of the money and the yachts and the fancy cars, and a lot of it is just fluff. And they're losing touch with their meaning, and they're working like crazy hours and stretching themselves and just kind of chasing this kind of, one day I'll get there, and it's never enough, and they keep building, and then they look back and, what am I doing? And so we all have to this mechanism of conditioning is what is giving us pleasure, and is it really giving us our true self pleasure, or is it just our ego getting pleasure from it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, and thinking about coaching, the behavioral model, and here I'm speaking strictly of behaviorism, not cognitive behavioral, which is a different model we'll talk about next time, but just the looking at observable behavior and trying to change that. The reason it didn't work, or it doesn't work as a coaching model, is because in essence it's saying we cannot really be free. If you look at the model, if you look at Skinner's work, the ultimate conclusion is that we can never be free. The only thing we can do is change the contingencies of the environment, meaning change the pattern of rewards and punishments.
But you're still operating in that dynamic.
But still being conditioned. In his model, we can never have real free will because we're always depending on how the environment is going to respond to our actions.
And in Eastern traditions, they talk about non-attachment, and that's the one thing that we always have is that kind of, if we can let go of that temporary reward, we can free ourselves. But if we're hooked into it, it's like pulling us along. And most of us, I would say, they say they did brain scans, and they said that we make a decision around 8 seconds unconsciously before we actually do it, because our brain already has all the decisions already made. So we're really trapped in. And so that's why, doing deeper work besides just changing behavior. A lot of times we coaching with someone, and they'll be like, well, maybe I'll do this, or I'll stand up to this person, and I'll take action, and I'll tell my boss, I don't care. And it's like, great, but you're still hooked in. You still want some kind of result. You want your boss to say, I'm sorry, you're such a great person, and I messed up. You're still kind of caught up. And you think just shifting behavior and like moving objects out here is going to change your life. And that's...
and it's interesting that in the Eastern tradition, or the wisdom traditions, they were well aware of the conditioning force at play in the environment. But the way they conceptualize it is that you're only conditioned if you are attached to the result of your actions. They simply say, if you drop the attachment to the results of your action, you're free. And that's experimentally proven now. If you're not attached to getting a certain result from the action that you're taking, then the environment has no conditioning power over you. So that is freedom. You're free then to act despite the circumstances. And that's really the only freedom that we have. If you succeed by kind of creating those external goals for yourself all the time, then you're locking yourself up in that kind of conditioning model of that experience. Or
that if the external is the only thing that can motivate you, then you're really, from a spiritual standpoint, you don't matter. It's those objects and material things that make you happy. And,
right.
If you think about Buddhism, they always say that person doesn't make me happy or sad. That object isn't, ice cream's not making me happy. It's my mind. But in behaviorism, they don't even count that. They just assume you're just responding. You're responding. Now, extrinsic motivation is what you're talking about. Now, so how do we motivate ourselves to change these habits besides just changing behavior? Is that we have to have intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, so a simple way to think about it is, if you're working for the money, that's an extrinsic motivation. The reward is outside of you. But if you're working for a higher purpose, that's an intrinsic motivation, meaning you're doing your actions and you're doing your best work, not just to get the money. I mean, the money will be there because by principle, anytime you take an action, there is a result. But that's not the primary motive for you. You're focusing more on creating something, right? An an internal vision that you have. You're working towards creating that. That's the higher purpose.
And they actually did. They did this famous experiment where there was this kindergarten or preschool, I think it was, and while the kids were waiting for the parents to pick them up, they would just have paper out, and so the kids would be, just drawing, and they were making all these cool drawings, and they were really excited. And then the preschool teacher said, "Ooh, I have a good idea. Since they love drawing, why don't we make it a contest and give a prize to them every time they, whoever has the best drawing?" And they thought that would motivate them by getting, and now I'm going to give you a prize on top of it. But what happened is it decreases their motivation. It actually made what they were doing work versus play. And so I want you to think about that for you. Is what's motivating you is if you have to wait for the prize, like I have to celebrate when I lose 10 pounds, or if I make, a certain amount of money by the end of the month and get 10 clients if I'm a coach, it'll feel like you're working. But if you're doing it because you love it, because you feel like I always say, this is what you were meant to do. I love to coach. I love to teach. And you let go of the attachment to what that looks like. But you have goals and all those things, but you're not attached to them. It doesn't mean that you don't care about the goals or that you don't have goals. But the way you approach them is from a place of play and creativity and from your heart. Then it just doesn't feel like work.
That's right.
And so that's where that intrinsic, the action itself gives you joy. Versus the result gives me joy. So you're taking that result out of the way and saying, I just love what I do. And it's so weird, but it seems counterintuitive. But when you take away the external motivation, you end up feeling happier. You are wealthier. Even in relationships, like dating, I always tell when I was doing a lot of dating coaching, I was like, just enjoy meeting people and just enjoy talking about, meeting interesting people. And this, you never get this opportunity once you're married, is to meet all these different interesting men and women and go out to dinner and have fun. And if that process can be joyful versus, okay, he's not the one next. He's not the one next. Oh, I hate dating.
Oh, the swiping.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Oh, it's so much work. I just can't wait for that one guy to come. And it's like you're not even enjoying the process. How do you think that other person's going to feel across from you? And I think that's what's missing in a lot of our life, is that we don't have any meaning to what we're doing. We're just doing it for that goal.
Yeah, we've certainly had our share of working with people that are very extrinsically motivated. They have certain goals in their life, and there's nothing wrong with having goals. But in thinking about what really motivates you, what makes you tick, what makes you get up in the morning, and is it exciting for you? And most importantly, is it meaningful? Because a lot of these goals, they're just objects. It's just money. It's just things. They don't really bring meaning to the individual.
And maybe in the beginning, there is that mechanism for that initial attachment. I mean, it does serve a purpose in a way, but you have to watch not to get too attached. And I remember when I first started, before you and I worked together, I was at this event, and the coach had all those successful coaches on the stage. And I remember I was in the audience, and I was like, next year I'm going to be on that stage. I'm going to be one of his success stories. And I was so like, I'm going to be a millionaire coach and all this stuff. And turns out the next year, you and I started working together, and he had me on stage. And I had all the badges, and I was like, here, this is what I've been working for. And then I was like, meh. This is what I've been working for. It was like, what was that about? It was all ego. It was all like, I need to prove something. And I took the badge off and I put it down, and I had all like the VIP slaps on it, and, VIP and a speaker and all this stuff. And I said, I'm still me. And then that's the point where I said, you know what? I got to do this a different way. Like I need a different motivation. This is not enough. They call, in the coaching industry, there's a term they call the 7-figure blues. It's like everyone wants to get to that 7-figure mark. And then everyone I know who's gone there says, I got so depressed afterwards because it's not really what I was looking for. I thought that was going to make me happy. They also did some studies with people who were like rock stars, and they, played in bands, and they, were in local clubs, and they finally had their big hit in their 40s. And then they started doing drugs because they were like, this isn't not what it was meant to be. Like, I was looking for that one day that I'll feel complete.
Right.
And think about our life. If we're living our life that one day, I'm going to finally get that carrot. One day in the future, that carrot's going to make me feel complete. That person, that money, that ideal weight. It's like you're chasing an illusion, and then you end up at 90 years old or 85 going, what the heck was I chasing? I remember when I first met you, you used to say all the time, I'd be like stressed out about something, and you'd say, where are you going? I'm like, where am I going? And it was that question of where are we, what is motivating us? And and the world is all filled with this extrinsic motivation. And so we have to wake up to know it's there, and maybe it's good to have it a little bit, give us our little kick. And if we didn't have it at all, I don't think we would do anything to improve our life. But that's not the end zone. It's like a realization to know that there's a higher purpose for why we're here, not just to gather stuff and collect certificates and awards and accolades.
Yeah, so from the Jungian coaching perspective, then we would say you don't have free will in the beginning part of your life because you're acting out of conditioning. But that's okay, because that at that part in your life in the beginning, you have to build up an ego and you have to build up this persona, this ability to survive in the natural world and in the social world. So you need that conditioning power. But in the second half of your life, Jung says, your objective now, your challenge is to free yourself, to free your mind from that conditioning, to transcend that conditioning. And that's where you find yourself. Yeah. That meaning, that kind of purpose in your life that can only come from that internal search.
Yeah, it's just like those kindergartens. They just to be creative and just to love life for itself. That's the rewarding fulfillment, because then you don't have to wait for the reward to feel fulfilled. You're fulfilled right now. Like the process of painting a picture or writing a song or writing a play or a book. That process can be just so life transformational. Like in our coach training, the process of getting trained is actually. The process itself is really not just the end, it's fulfilling in itself to understand. And I think it's really important for people to recognize, because you don't want to spend your whole life chasing mirages. And that one day, when everything, falls into place, there's going to be a moment where everything's perfect, and life isn't not that way. Life is messy, and it's full of joy, and it's full of pain, and it's full of heartache, and it's full of love. And we have to take it all and love all of it. And that's really what Jung talked about in individuation. It's not about making a perfect persona, and I'm going to be confident, and I'm going to have this great presentation to the world, and I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to be generous with my time and help people and save the world. It's about also including all the dark parts of ourselves that we don't want people to know, and that we accept and love even the parts when we're down and we don't feel like being up, or we're sick, and we want to like be in our jammies all day, or we have a tragedy in our life. We don't want to keep on a happy face. We want to be real. That's really the freedom, is just to be in life and integrate all those parts instead of just always propping up that persona and gathering items, gathering material items for your collection.
So if you're playing along at home, think about what motivates you. Is it some extrinsic object, money, fame, for success, kind of admiration from peers, any of those things? Again, there's nothing wrong with them, but if you let those be your sole motivators, you're giving your power away. Because as soon as the circumstances change externally, and they will change.
Well, isn't there also a numbing effect of that? Once you get in enough, Like if you ate ice cream every day, it
Yeah,
would
the
lose
only
its
thing you
condition.
can do is increase the payoff.
And that's why people get addicted, because they need a bigger hit.
And it's
bigger
never
hit.
enough money, it's never enough fame, it's never enough. And that satisfaction, that meaning is not there. Whereas when you reach those goals, but from an internal motivation, that higher purpose, that sense of contributing, of developing yourself, that's a very different story. Right? It leads to happiness, it leads to fulfillment, to creating meaning in your life.
I have to say that this year has been, even though with COVID and everything, it's been one of the most rewarding years for myself, of feeling truly connected to our work more than ever before, because it's almost like all the external has been shut down. Like I'd love to travel and go have our live events, and we're kind of stuck here, hunkering down and having to rethink things, and who do we want in our world, and what kind of work do we want to teach, and coming from that true place. It's just, we've always loved our work, but I feel like this year has just been so different in a deeper way of really appreciating, and in that non-attachment, because everything's so unpredictable that it's almost like it benefits you to not be attached, because then you're open to creativity. When you're too attached, you limit your options. There's no creativity, and you end up just repeating the past. You stay in that comfort zone.
Yeah, I would also invite people to think about your habits and try to figure out how they got conditioned into your system, and be aware that you can free your mind. You can free yourself from those habits, that habitual responding to life. That there is a way. We're not trapped in our circumstances. We're only trapped when we don't believe there's any way out. And that's what I saw in Skinner, that he was being irresponsible in that regards, that he was giving people the message that there is no way out of conditioning. The only thing you can do is kind of live with it.
And from a non-spiritual, biological point of view,
Yeah.
I would see, if you just saw and didn't incorporate the mind or spirit, it would make sense. But we're now having this, we know that there's more to us than just our biology.
Absolutely.
So great topic. Next week we're going to talk about cognitive behavioral. So we have the behavior, now we're adding the other level of this on top of it, which is a more elaborate way. And this is very common in a lot of coaching models. It's still just working on the conscious level, but it's how we think and act and feel to get results, and those patterns in a more complex way. So it'll be interesting to have that conversation next week. So have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for watching, guys.
And we will see you soon.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.